Well, good morning. It is Tuesday, February 23rd. Get towards the end of the month, last week or so. We are gathered for our morning devotion. Again, we're using Lent for Everybody by Tom Wright. Going through the Gospel of Mark in our devotions, and on Sundays we are using the Psalms that he is choosing for those days to explain how Jesus experienced Lent and to explain how his entire ministry and life built up towards Easter Sunday and Good Friday. So with that, our scripture reference this morning is Mark chapter 3, verses 1 through 19, and the focus is verses 13 through 19, and that is what I will read. It says, Jesus went up to the mountain and summoned the people he wanted, and they came to him. He appointed 12, naming them apostles, to be with him and to be sent out as heralds and to have authority to cast out demons. In appointing the 12, he named Simon Peter, James, the son of Zebedee, and his brother John. He named Boanerges, which means sons of thunder. The others were Andrew, Philip, Bartholomew, Matthew, Thomas, James, the son of Alphaeus, Thaddeus, Simon the Canaanite, and Judas Iscariot, the one who would hand him over. And so Dr. Wright writes these words. You know, the revolution has become serious when its leaders appoint an alternative government. The Western world watched and waited in the early months of 2011 as a Libyan rebel set out a kind of shadow body. There was still a government in Tripoli, loyal to the long leader, Colonel Gaddafi, but away to the northeast in one of the rebel strongholds, the increasingly influential rebels movement set up a body of administrators, the larger and larger area under its control. Until we realize that Jesus' calling of the 12 must have felt a bit like that, we won't get to the heart of what is going on. He was, after all, behaving as if he was already in charge, speaking with authority and backing up his words with decisive and startling actions. He has already aroused hostility and threats from the existing authorities, both real and appointed. Undeterred, Jesus moved ahead. His next action spoke volumes. Anybody behaving as if they were in charge and then calling people and giving them new names and apparently special roles is quite obviously making a statement. He is, it seems, consolidating his position. He isn't just a maverick going around doing bizarre and surprising things. He seems to be some kind of strategy. But the strategy has a clear symbolic value. Numbers speak volume. If Jesus has given his followers the new 10 Commandments, the point would have been obvious. They are to replace the 10 given by God to Moses on Sinai. What Jesus is equally obvious to anyone with the least knowledge of ancient Israel and the Jewish hope for first centuries. The people of Israel were a family, tracing ancestry back to the patriarch of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Jacob had 12 sons, some of whom became famous: Reuben, Simeon, Levi, and above all Judah, Joseph, and Benjamin. And some who remained less so: Naphtali, Issachar, Asher, Gad, Zebulun, and Dan. The great primal collection of biblical books, the first 5 from Genesis to Deuteronomy, place a special emphasis on the 12 and their patriarchal calling. When the Israelites finally entered the Promised Land after their 40 years wandering the desert, Joshua parceled out the land into 12 tribes, with the descendants of Levi living and working as priests and teaching among the others. As many generations disaster struck, the northern tribes were carried away in captivity by the Assyrians. Nobody really knew where they were or whether they had been simply disappeared. Only the tribe of Benjamin and Judah and such Levites as lived among them remained. Until then, the people had been known as the Israelites, the 12 sons of Jacob, whose special names were given by God was Israel. Now they would be known as Judah people. They were the modern Jews. That's where the word modern Jews comes from. But there were some great ancient prophets who had predicted that God would restore the fortunes of his people and he would call the 12 tribes back into existence. There can be no doubt that this is the message Jesus wanted conveyed when he called 12 from among its followers and spoke of them as such. This was not simply a renewal of Judaism, the Judah people. This was renewal of Israel itself. This was going back to the beginning move. It was almost as powerful and as dangerous a ploy as it would be today if apparently self-appointed leaders were to call a press conference in front of Buckingham Palace or the White House lawn, or were building a new official house and called it Buckingham Palace or the White House. Two other features of Jesus' calling of the 12 stand out particularly. First, it forces us to ask, as do Jesus' actions, who does he think he is? He is not the first of the 12, a kind of first among equals. No, he calls the 12 into existence. That makes him at least a new Jacob, but perhaps he is going further. It is, after all, God himself who calls the people of Israel to be his people. The second feature reinforces the first. Jesus gives to some of the 12 new names. He names Simon, Peter, which means rock or stone. James and John, the two sons of Zebedee, he names Boreas, which means sons of thunder. But this is more or less what God had done with some of the original patriarchs. God renamed Abram, Abraham, father of nations. He renamed Joseph, or Jacob, Israel, which means prince of God. The new names carried a meaning, and the meaning indicates the purpose of God. We might perhaps have been tempted to pass over this list of the 12. We don't know very much about most of them, but the fact that there were 12 of them speaks more powerful than any individual achievement, and it speaks right through the ages to us as well. The early Christians were quite clear that though Jesus had called the 12 as the foundation of his work, he had then built on that foundation and was continuing to do so. And Jesus himself promises in the book of Revelation that he will give a special new name to those who conquer, who hold out in the war against wickedness and corruption. This promise holds firm and good for every single one of Jesus' followers today. Read the list of names slowly once more. Only this time, in between each of the 12 whom Jesus called, place the names of your Christian leaders, teachers, and friends. Right in the middle, place your name. And pray that God will enable you to hear him call you once more by name, as he called you in your baptism, and showed you how you too can be part of this alternative government, his project of kingdom and renewal. So just to sum that up, the point of all this is that Jesus had a purpose in calling these 12 and renaming them, giving them special names. Simon, he called Peter. James and John, the sons of thunder, giving them new names. The purpose was to renew God's kingdom, renew the faith of the 12 tribes of Israel. It was on purpose. This wasn't just an accidental thing that Jesus was doing. He was starting a new movement and bringing everybody back to the 12 tribes where they had all started. This is something we miss when we read the words. Yeah, we know there's 12 and we get some of those connections, but we need to understand that this purpose was something that led to Jesus' demise at the end for Good Friday, because he had started this new movement. It's like he started a new government with these 12 as the cabinet members. Jesus was on a roll. Jesus was getting things started. And ultimately this led to his decline and his death on Good Friday. But this was all a part of Jesus' plan and God's plan to renew the Jewish people and to make them a new part of God's kingdom, to rescue them from wickedness and corruption, to use his words. This was all part of the plan. So when you read those names, as he mentions, read them slowly, but mention your Christian leaders, teachers, pastors, whoever, insert your name in there as well. And hope that God calls you. Listen for God's call in those names.